Okay, this is the next part of transport in living things. So over in the transport in humans, what will happen is the human has a transport system called the circulatory system. Now this circulatory system, right, involves only a few kinds of blood vessels, as well as the heart, as well as the blood. So these three actually makes up the whole circulatory system in the human body, and that the circulatory system is responsible for transporting substance throughout the whole entire body. Okay, why do we need one of this? Is because we need to actually be able to bring nutrients, water and oxygen to all parts of the body cells, and at the same time to remove any form of waste material. Okay, so what will happen is, if you look at the heart, the three main ideas, right, we will see that the heart acts as a pump to generate the force for all the items to be transported around your body. The blood vessels are the passage or the pipes, okay, to carry all the blood flow, all the nutrients everywhere, and of course the blood is the transport medium. It's like the car that carries all your goods and everything around your body. Okay, now next we look at the heart. So the heart is generally made up of four main chamber, and that it generally pumps blood around the body. So out of the heart, right, if you divide the heart into four main parts, because they say four chamber, you have the right side of the heart and the top and bottom. So if I were to draw something like this, where this is the top part, this is the bottom part of the heart, then you have the left side of the heart and the right side of the heart. So at the top side of the heart, we usually call it the atrium. Okay, and at the bottom we call it the ventricle. Next, the left and right is just as straightforward as this is the left side, and the other one is known as the right side. And this is generally how the blood actually flows in these four chambers. So where do blood usually start pumping in first? Blood would usually enter the left atrium first, like that's how you want to tell a story, followed by the left ventricle. Now where the number one comes from is from the rest of the body. Then after that, what will happen is the blood, right, from the left ventricle will then go to the lungs, and from the lungs it will then be transported to the right atrium. After it has pumped to the right atrium, it will then move down into the right ventricle before it pumps back to the rest of the body. So it'll be 3, 4, 5, and finally number 6. Do take note that at this particular junction here, they tend to actually convert to have a lot of oxygen. Okay, so we can see from number 1 here, the right atrium is at this particular portion here. Alright, followed by number 2, it's orange. This will be where the right ventricle is. They will then pump to the rest of the to the lungs and later re-enter at number 5. Okay, and this is the right atrium, and later you move to this area here, and last but not least, it will then move into the aorta, which is number 6. Okay, so generally this is how it is. So the left ventricle, this particular region here, this region here has a very thick muscular wall. Now why do we need this thick muscular wall? It's so that you are able to pump blood at high enough pressure to the rest of the body. If this wall is not thick enough, right, it's not able to withstand the high pressure, that's one. It will also not be able to generate sufficient force to pump blood to the rest of your body, so it will be very slow, very weak. And at the right ventricle, it tends to have a thinner muscular wall. And this is because the blood is pumping at a lower pressure. Now, to aid this thing, to prevent the blood from being drawn back into the previous passage, right, or to make blood to actually flow in one direction only, there's the presence of valves in the heart to ensure that blood flows in only one direction and in no other direction. Is that clear? Now next we look into the blood vessels. Okay, another thing to note is in the human body, right, where's your right hand, where's your left hand, right? Your right hand is actually over here, and this is your left hand. So do take note that the arrangement is laterally inverted from when you're looking at it, when you're looking at the picture. Okay. Next is the blood vessels. There are three main blood vessels that you need to know. They are your arteries, veins, and capillaries. Okay, your arteries, veins, and capillaries. And each of it has its own unique purpose and characteristics. So for the artery, it mainly carries blood away from the heart. Okay, and for vein, it generally carries blood towards or into the heart. And last but not least, capillary is just a bridge between two. How do you remember is that away starts with A, so it's similar here, and vein is into the heart, so it's towards the heart. Okay, and of course capillary, it involves the exchange of your juices. Some characteristics of each of these blood vessels, right, they tend to have actually the artery, because it pumps blood away from the heart, it needs to be able to withstand the high pressure from the heart, so it generally has a thicker muscular wall to withstand the higher pressure. And veins would have a thinner muscular wall, so that you don't have to withstand the high pressure, because you are just moving towards the heart only. And one thing to actually aid in this is that there's the presence of valves. Okay, what are valves? Valves are like the gates to ensure that blood will be able to flow through. So in a sense, if I were to draw a blood vessel, okay, and there's valves are like your flaps, and they'll be present in veins. So in this sense, right, you are able to know that when blood travels in this direction upwards, the valves will open, so that blood will move upwards. So you can see that the directional valve, right, will actually move in the same area of where the arrowhead is. In the event that there is actually backflow of blood, this will actually shut, so that there is no blood moving towards the backflow. Okay. So next is capillary. They tend to be very narrow and one cell thick, so there's also valves absent, and because it is one cell thick, which is very thin, there is very low blood pressure that is actually managing it. Okay. Okay, so blood, right, in a sense, right, they have about 5 liters of in the human body you have about 5 liters of blood lah. And blood is known as the fluid of life, and there is actually a fluid tissue that consists of all these main components: the red blood cells, the white blood cell, platelets, and plasma. Okay, so these are the components of blood, and that blood generally acts as the transport medium. Now, because of all these components, right, each of these components have its specific purpose. So the red blood cell generally transports oxygen. White blood cells tends to fight off infection. Your platelets tends to do for blood clotting. Okay, so this one is oxygen transport. This one is fight off infection. Platelets is then for blood clotting. And last but not least, this one is just as the medium to move around freely and things like this. Okay, so in a sense, blood acts as the transport system where, like, what are some components they actually carry oxygen, mainly in your red blood cells. Next thing is your hormones. They are usually like protein transported in your bloodstream, and of course your nutrients. So all these, right, it also transports the following substance from the body cells, like carbon dioxide and your waste material. So these are some other items as well, okay, that can be transported by your body cells. So when we look even deeper, your red blood cells, they do not actually have the presence of a nucleus, and therefore in the absence of the nucleus, they tend to be able to contain more oxygen. How so? There is actually this component called the hemoglobin that is present inside red blood cells. This is the one responsible to actually combine with your oxygen molecules, such that you can actually transport it to the rest of the body. And in the lungs, the oxygen tends to diffuse into the bloodstream and combine with the hemoglobin to be transported around the body. So two main features that it has, or adaptation, and this one usually comes up for exam, is that there is no nucleus. So that it's able to contain more hemoglobin. Able to contain more hemoglobin means you can contain more oxygen. Having a circular biconcave shape helps to increase surface area so that more oxygen can diffuse through. Now, biconcave is, in a sense, when you see the red blood cells in a side view, right, it's able to curve both the top and the bottom. Okay, and on top of that, it is also very flexible to be able to squeeze through narrow capillaries. Your white blood cells, there is two types of white blood cells, your lymphocytes and phagocytes. Your lymphocytes tends to produce antibodies to try to fight off infection. Your phagocytes tends to actually engulf and ingest bacteria to kill it. So they tend to, both of them forms your immune system, and they protect the body against diseases and fight off infection. White blood cells, they tend not to be able to fight off viruses. So that is one thing to take note of. Okay, and then of course platelets is mainly to stop bleeding by forming blood clot. So all these together, right, will make up one portion called the plasma, where it's actually the liquid part of the blood, and generally it is the main mode of function for transportation. So what does it transport? All your blood cells, your plasma, even heat, to carry heat around to keep you warm, to try to remove any form of waste materials like your carbon dioxide, urea, food substances like nutrients, your glucose, amino acid, and of course your hormones. So the whole circulation of blood comes in together in this way, whereby there is the pulmonary artery that carries blood from the heart to the lungs. But do take note, right, that the blood that is transported from the pulmonary artery is deoxygenated. What this means is it doesn't contain, or it has low oxygen concentration, okay? But this is actually different from arteries that they tend to transport oxygenated blood, whereby there is oxygen here. Now, why is it so? It's because in this area here, oxygen has already been diffused into the red blood cell. So if I were to color it, right, where blue color will denote there is deoxygenated blood, I would say that this whole portion here, before it enters the lungs, is deoxygenated blood. Okay, so we can see even here, or even here, all these are deoxygenated blood. And this is where most of the veins are physically present. So in terms of direction as to where blood actually moves towards to, it will all move towards the heart. So all this will move upwards. Okay. Why doesn't blood flow downwards? It's because of the presence of valve. So they will not actually flow downwards, it will actually flow directly towards the heart. Okay. Then of course, after it has gone to the lungs, it will be filled with oxygen, and they tend to give a reddish kind of tone to it. So this part here onwards, they tend to be oxygenated blood. and then gravity will help to, you see, push the blood downwards. So you don't really have to worry so much. And the thing is, what about this top part here? Now the thing is, the blood vessels towards the brain, right? Because it is very near the heart, so it has generally large enough pressure to actually put the blood, to pump the blood upwards. And so if I were to draw the direction, this will actually move downwards. So you could see from this how the direction of blood is actually moving. And over at the blood capillaries, this is where all the exchanges happens of substances such as your glucose, your food nutrients, your oxygen, and of course your waste material. Then the arteries tends to transport oxygenated blood to the rest of the body, while the exception is your pulmonary vein that carries the oxygenated blood. So do take note of the statement whereby not all veins carries deoxygenated blood. There is one exception, which is the pulmonary vein. Okay, and of course the largest artery in a human body is actually known as your aorta, which is the main artery. Okay, and so in the sense, for the veins, blood is being brought back to the body by the veins, and then the blood will enter the right atrium. Okay, so generally what happens is, first of all, blood will enter into the right ventricle, right atrium, and after that, the right atrium will contract. This will then push blood to the right ventricle and forces the opening of your tricuspid valve. Your tricuspid valve is located somewhere here. Okay, so when this opens, it moves back here. Then when your right ventricle contracts, this will then pump blood towards the lung via the pulmonary artery. So this is your pulmonary artery, and what will happen is this will open the semilunar valves. Now do take note that when the ventricle contracts, the tricuspid valves also shut close to prevent blood from entering back into the right atrium. So it goes back to the lungs, do the gaseous exchange, and through the gaseous exchange, the blood will then be transported to the pulmonary vein and back into the to the left atrium, which is located somewhere here. This will then allow the left atrium to contract, and when this were to happen, right, when your left atrium contracts, it will then pump blood to your left ventricle, resulting in your bicuspid valve. Your bicuspid valve is located in this region here to open. Then it will be your left ventricle that will start to contract, pushing blood towards the aorta and to the rest of the body, and shutting the bicuspid valve close. The reason for this shutting it close is to prevent blood from the left ventricle to re-enter into the left atrium. Okay, so this is one whole part of how the blood actually is circulated. Now in the event, right, that there is actually a hole in the middle of the heart, this will allow the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood to mix, and this is not a very good thing. What will happen? This wastes the efficiency of gaseous exchange. And what are some symptoms the person will face? You'll be breathless, you'll be tired, and things like this. Okay, so this is the portion for blood circulation in the human body, and the next part I will be talking about the